A little anecdote, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday. He said, Herk, I've got to go to town and pay my water bill. Well, now he lives in Lewiston, so I thought, well, what's he going to Weaverville to pay his water bill for? So I asked him, I said, Tom, why are you going to Weaverville to pay your water bill? Well, I got to go to the bank and transfer funds. And I said, it's a water bill. How bad could that be? Well, it's for 30 acres of avocados. It's $100,000. 1 year, 30 acres of avocados. He lives in the desert, he says. I said, you're not going to be able to sustain this very long, are you? And he said, no. No, he says, I'll be out of business along with a bunch of my other friends, and there'll be a 30-acre subdivision out here. So that's how that's going. I mentioned his name before, and he's going to introduce his peers. And I just want to say I'm proud to be on the Trinity County Sheriff's Auxiliary and part of his team. And he's moving all of the sheriff type duty, all types of volunteers, neighborhood watch, whatever, through the auxiliary program. We all have to go through background checks. In fact, the undersheriff asked me one day, he says, did you just pop out of the ground here just a month or two ago when you signed the first form? And I says, no. He said, well, it's like you never existed. He said, there's nothing on you. I says, oh, you missed that 1967 speeding ticket, huh? So the background checks are pretty thorough. I'm proud to be what Bruce and I discussed is a good title, Community Liaison Officer for his cold case crew. And we've got one file that's about 6 inches thick and getting bigger, and he gave us 2 more and just authorized another investigation. So we're making progress under this man. And and knowing his humble ways, he wouldn't stand up here and brag about it. But I can brag about it for him, and it's an honor to serve with him. Your sheriff, Bruce Haney.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I want to briefly just go down the line here. This is something that's, I think, a bit unprecedented. We started them last fall up in Siskiyou County, and I'll give you a little bit of history of that. But first, I'd like to introduce Sheriff Jon Lopey, the Sheriff of Siskiyou County. Sheriff Tom Allman of Mendocino County. Sheriff Dave Hencratt, Tehama County. Sheriff Mike Poindexter of Modoc County. Sheriff Dean Wilson of Del Norte County. Thank you. I know how busy I am. I know how busy you guys are. Thank you for coming and attending this afternoon. I have some additional things to put out too. Commissioner Ronnie Rardin of, you don't need to stand, Ronnie Rardin of Otero County, New Mexico. You may be wondering, you have 5 sheriffs that don't get voted for in this county. You have a commissioner from out of New Mexico, and you'll find out why and what he has to say and the information that he can provide to us. You know, why are we here? I'm going to get into a little bit of history from my perspective in just a second. Richard Seal, thank you so much for arranging and taking care of Danny and Commissioner Rardin. Liz Bowen, thank you. She's going to be speaking to you also, and she is quite an organizer. Trinity County Patriots, thank you for putting this on, and inviting us. I really want to thank the Trinity County Sheriff's Auxiliary. It's grown exponentially in the last year and continues to grow, and really looking forward to the services that they're going to be able to assist the Sheriff's Department with as volunteers. Funds are scarce and they're becoming scarcer, and so volunteer programs are becoming more and more, not only more popular, but we need them because we just don't have the funds to do what we used to do. Who here is from out of Trinity County? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming to Trinity County and supporting us. Doug, thank you. Thank you, Doug Knox, for hosting a couple weeks ago up in El Turris. Thank you, sir. They're not here. Oh, yeah. Loma, Wharton, and Ray Kapitka. Josephine County, Oregon, right? No? Which? Douglas County, Oregon. It's interesting that what you're going to hear, and you're going to hear it. We have someone from New Mexico. You're going to have sheriffs from Northern California. We have individuals from Oregon. You're going to find out that a lot of the issues that are facing rural America aren't just happening here. They're happening everywhere. And that's why we're here today. Let me give you a little history, and this is going to be from my perspective, because I'm a new sheriff. There's other sheriffs up here that have been sheriffs longer than I have. But shortly after becoming sheriff, probably within a month or two, I went to a California State Sheriff's Association meeting. And Sheriff Tom Allman from Mendocino County had brought up some issues regarding Mendocino National Forest, some of the things he was dealing with, and suggested to the president that we form a public lands committee. Now, it got my attention because I know that close to 80% of Trinity County is public land. But the idea was somewhat dismissed and he wasn't really given much attention. Over the next few months, things started coming to our attention. Initially, what I recall was Sheriff Greg Hagwood of Plumas County, who apologizes for not being here. He had a prior commitment. But he had sent an email out wondering if anybody knew about what was called the Travel Management Plan, put together by the U.S. Forest Service. And so we all began kind of discussing it. A short time after that, we were all contacted by Sheriff Jon Lopey of Siskiyou County, talking about how they were talking about removing the dams along the Klamath River, about water right issues, about different state and federal agencies putting fish counters on creeks on private land. And, you know, his concern was real. He stated that the people of Siskiyou County were looking at losing generational farms and ranches if these dams were removed, if water rights were taken away. And we kind of got together, and I remember calling John and say, John, you know, I'm in Trinity County. What can I do? And he said, you know what? I'll let you know. Because what's affecting Siskiyou County, maybe today, is very likely going to affect Trinity County and the other counties as well at some point. Well, I'd probably say it was last fall, he contacted us and said, we're going to have a Defend Rural America conference in Wairika at the fairgrounds. Would you come up and support us? And I said, absolutely. Before we knew it, I think, what did we end up with, six? 6 sheriffs from 8? 8 sheriffs. Oh, we had 2 from Oregon as well. 2 sheriffs from Oregon. And an attorney. You always got to have an attorney there. But what we were recognizing was that by staying in communication with each other, we were watching federal and state agencies taking license to enforce regulations without going through proper procedures, which was talking to local government to see how that was going to affect either public safety or the economy. So we met up there. It was amazing to hear, even though our issues may be a little different, they're very much the same because they are from agencies outside this county or their county that we're affecting not only our public safety but our economies as well. So why did the sheriffs get involved? And why are there 5 sheriffs from? You're not going to vote for these guys, right? Because they live in another county, or maybe they live in your county. You may vote for them. We got involved because our job is public safety. That's what we do. What you'll do is you'll end up hearing from each one of these sheriffs as this goes on, and you'll find out what maybe particular issues they're having with different agencies in their county. But for Trinity County right now, as we enter a new fire season, our forests are of grave concern to me as a public safety officer. Let me give credit to the prior Board of Supervisors and our existing ones. They have done their work as far as putting resolutions, ordinances into place to try and protect this community and have, in this case it's the Forest Service, help thin out the forest and help mitigate some of the fire danger. I mentioned the travel management plan. That's another thing that we're looking at. The different agents, the Forest Service in particular, because that's who the primary public land manager is here, is looking at closing roads, decommissioning some, but the concern for me as the sheriff is I need access to the forest at times. Last fall was unprecedented for search and rescues for us, for lost hunters. I think we had about 6 to 8. Without those roads, we don't have access to the backcountry. Also, the roads are of great importance for fire suppression. We need those roads, and they've been in existence for quite some time. And what you're going to find out is as you talk to some of the issues that the sheriffs will bring up, but some of the information that Commissioner Rardin will provide on what Otero County has done, because they have that too. They have, what was it, the #1 driest forest in the United States, right? Yeah, so in other words, fire is a constant danger. We live in an ecosystem where we're never going to get away with that. We're away from that. But there's no reason why we can't responsibly harvest timber, thin our forests, which, guess what, would also provide some revenue to county departments so I can provide better public safety. So these are some of the issues that we're going to talk about. One of the things that came up was coordination. I don't know if anybody's really aware of that, but the first time I heard that, they said, well, you know, these agencies are supposed to coordinate with local government. Coordination was something that I would use to determine whether I had a drunk driver or not when I pulled him out of the car. You know, if he couldn't balance out, then or somebody with great coordination is a good athlete. So this has been a learning process and will continue to be for me, and I'm sure for the other sheriffs. I feel that I will always be a student of not only my profession but of the law and how I go about enforcing that. One of the things I've had a couple discussions now with the Board of Supervisors is that I'm forming it's called the Sheriff's Public Safety and Coordination Advisory Team. And it's going to consist of members of the public. Some may have an expertise in fire suppression. Some may have an expertise in forest management. Some may just like to ride their quad on public lands or whatever. I want a very diverse membership in the group. And the way I'm going to do that is we're going to start flying some articles in the paper. People are going to submit letters to my office. We thought email, but I get close to 100 emails a day, and it's really hard for me to keep up with them. So I think a letter is going to be much more effective and something that I can put my hands on. Now, as we talk about these various agencies and some of the issues we're having with them, we also have very good working relationships with some of them in other ways as well. The Ruth fire last summer was a good example of that. That was a small fire. You know, if there was anybody here, I think we lost about 5 houses, which is a lot, especially if it's your house. But it taxed the sheriff's department to its limits to provide the public safety that was necessary to, one, do the evacuations. And once we do those evacuations, we become responsible for the property protection of that property because we've told you to get out of your house. So you leave your house, we need to make sure, to the best of our ability, that that property is safe and people aren't going to come and loot your house. And we called upon CHP. We called upon U.S. Forest Service law enforcement. And because we had to also guard the aircraft that was at the Flying AA airport. So we have working relationships. We have some issues with some agencies as well. And so my goal is to work these issues out, but we need to move forward. We need to move forward with thinning our force. We need to move forward with becoming more self-reliant and not relying on grants and government handouts to be, and we have a renewable resource here. You drive by the mill and you see the logs stacked up, and from what I understand, some of those logs are from British Columbia. I mean, they're not even, and we have that resource here. So those are going to be some of the issues that we need to address. And what's going to be interesting, and again, thank you, Commissioner Varden, for coming here, because they've been fighting this battle. They've been fighting this battle for years. And we want to jump on your coattails. That's what we want to do. A lot of these gentlemen have commitments. They had commitments this morning, and they also have commitments this evening. So I'm going to pass this on. I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about what's going on in their county. I may comment in between, but some of these gentlemen have to take off fairly soon, so we're gonna get this moving. And I think first of all, I'll pass the microphone to Sheriff Hencratt from Tehama County.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm here to support Sheriff Bruce here. You know, a little bit about myself. I have an agriculture background. I was raised on ranches. I was raised in Red Bluff. I understand rural issues. I understand urban issues. You know, I went to work at the Sheriff's Office in 1988. I got into police work to help people. I've rose through the ranks at the Sheriff's Office, spent my entire career there. At one point in my career, I didn't necessarily agree with the way the Sheriff's administration was headed, so decided it was time to put up or shut up, ran for sheriff, again to make a change, and got elected. So I'm a rookie sheriff. I guess I'm in my sophomore year now. This is year 2. So I'm not a very political person, but when it comes to issues that affect us in our counties and with the way I was raised, I decided to get involved in you know, what we're all here for today. Now, you're going to hear from other guys up here that, you know, I'm as guilty as anybody for assuming that our government, local, state, and federal, always knew what it was doing during the time I was growing up and as an adult. But, becoming educated on that's not necessarily always the case because government's made up of people and people make mistakes or go down the wrong paths. I've become involved with this group and I'm very proud to be part of this group. They're all honorable people, honorable men, and respected sheriffs. I'm very fortunate in Tehama County because I have a board of supervisors that supports me, supports us and our citizens, and a contingent is here, of the issues that we feel are important. Travel management plan, something I'd never heard of, just like Sheriff Haney hadn't, to some extent. So when we started looking at that travel management plan and the fact that that the forest, we have 4 forests in our county, Shasta, Trinity, Plumas, Lassen, and Mendocino. The forest managers at the Shasta Trinity Forest, she wanted to decommission some roads. Again, I'm kicking my heels together. I'm very fortunate that the chairman of our board of supervisors agree with me that, well, before they do any of this, they need to talk to us because it affects our county. It affects public safety, number one, just like you're going to hear a lot. And so, with some help from Sylvia Milligan, who's out in the crowd here, we became, yeah, she deserves a hand. we, meaning our citizens and myself and our board, started to become educated on the coordination process. Well, guess what happened? Next thing I know is our board and our chairman decided that we need a coordination committee. So we've established a coordination committee through the Board of Supervisors. It consists of myself, 2 Board of Supervisors, planning director, I think 4 citizens at large, so to speak, members at large, and citizens who show up to do the legwork for us. So we're moving ahead, and as a result of that, the travel management plan that affects our side of the Shasta Trinity National Forest has slowed down. In fact, thank you. They've proposed, we've given a little bit, we understand negotiation, we've given a little bit. They proposed that we have almost come up with a plan to establish what's going to stay open, what's not going to stay open, level of openness, level of road, and very little decommissioning. And so, in my mind, that is a big win for us and our citizens of Tehama County. I don't want to talk very long up here because we have a big group to go to, and I spent the morning with the commissioner over here out of Otero County, New Mexico, and it was a morning well spent. But I want to leave you all with kind of Dave Hencratt's philosophy of being a person. I think as long as we're reasonable people, I don't care where you're elected official, sheriff, chief of police, commissioner, board of supervisor, and as long as what we do is reasonable with state and federal government, I don't think we can go wrong. You know, people have told me, you're the sheriff of Tehama County, you got all this power. It is a powerful position and powerful office, the office of the sheriff, but we have zero power without the backing of the people. And that's why it's nice to see, as we go throughout these counties, through these forums, that people show up to become educated, they want to learn, and they want to back reasonableness. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Sheriff Hencratt just touched on the reality of it's the people. That's where the power. I mean, some of these agencies are the individuals heading these are appointed. If you don't like the job I'm doing, then you can vote me out. That's the power of the people. A lot of the people heading these agencies are appointed by layers and layers and layers of government. It's something that we obviously need to address. But this is where it starts right here. This is where the power lies. This is where the power was intended from the founding of this country, is in the hands of the people. I would like to next introduce you to Sheriff Mike Poindexter of Modoc County.
Thanks, Bruce. It's really a pleasure to be here. I want to thank all of you. It's an honor for me to be here. I've been a public servant my whole life. To see the people getting out of the house, getting off the sofa, coming out and getting themselves educated as to where this country's going and where we need to take it. It's kind of gotten off track. Bruce and I chewed some of the same dirt in LA, I think, years ago. A little history about me. I've been in Modoc County since 1987. So I'm not a Modocer, if there are some people from Modoc here. And thank you for coming over here. Jesse, young lady in the crowd here running for assembly. So, you know, it's great to see these young kids. It really is. Jesse's the chair of our Republican committee in Modoc County now. So, I'm lucky, like Dave is here in Modoc County. We have a comprehensive land use plan, but the funny thing is I didn't know anything about it. I'm a relatively new sheriff as well. We have a resource and conservation officer that runs the Farm Bureau, and he says, hey, there's a guy by the name of Fred Kelly Grant going to be speaking in Josephine County about some problems they're having up there over mining issues. He says you might want to go and it would be interesting for you to go, and there's some things you should know. And that was the first time that I listened to and was aware of some of the problems that we're having that affect our economy. Because, you know, I'm a cop. I mean, have been either in the service or in law enforcement my whole life. We don't generate revenue. We don't go out and try to figure out how to get revenue. We protect the people. That's our job. And as sheriffs, which is I've worked for the state. I was a highway patrolman for 28 years. I retired. It's probably not a plus, maybe, to a lot of people. Then I worked for a city. But the sheriff's job has really opened my eyes to the fact that, God, I can't tell you how many times I took the oath of office over the years. Going in the military, going on one job to another job, without really knowing or really listening to or studying what I'm swearing to. And this process has really opened my eyes to that. I went from Josephine County to Las Vegas. Sheriff Mack was able to raise enough money to send, and I think pretty much just about everybody here was there, and learned more about the Constitution, learned more about the government, learned more about this key buzzword that's going around, coordination. And it's funny because I went back to Modoc, and we're the last frontier, I think. We're not on the way to anywhere. You know, we're 4,200 square miles, 74% public land. And when I say public land, there's something right there that needs to be educated. People need to know. You know who really needs to know it's public land? The government. That's exactly right. I had some Forest Service law enforcement in my office because I had some issues with one of their law enforcement officers and one of my citizens, and I told them that he was no longer welcome in my county. And they weren't happy, so they sent 5 guys up to try to put me in a corner. And I said, look, I'm just, my job, the people elected me, I work for the people of Modoc County, is to protect the people of Modoc County. What happened here shouldn't have happened. And until I can discipline, train your people, and hold them to the standard I hold my people to, they're not going to do that. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen here. The interesting thing was, I found out that they're trying to expand that authority, and I was looking at the last several lines of their plan to do that, which they sent out to everybody. And I had these guys in my office, and I pulled it out of my desk, and I said, it says here that you're wanting to expand your law enforcement authority so that you can, 1, better protect the natural resources, 2, better protect your Forest Service employees, 3, and this is their document, better protect the people. And I said, I've been a public servant my whole life, and that's just backwards. My job is to protect the people, number 1. Number 1. And yeah, I get the natural resources thing, but quite frankly, who knows how to protect our renewable resources better than the people that have been making their living off of that land for 3 or 4 generations? I mean, that's a no-brainer. So I said they weren't real happy with me, and they went away. But I've been educating myself more and more and more. And the oath of office, the Bill of Rights, really important, folks. And this is why it's so important, and I'm so glad to see people out here. Because I don't think, how many people heard this coordination like Bruce said? It's a highly intoxicated driver doesn't have any. But how many people know about it? How many people know that the federal government has to coordinate? They don't just get to make decisions. Modoc County has a depressed economy. And everybody's scrambling all the time trying to figure out how do we fix it. Well, you know, in Modoc County, how have we, what is our culture? Our culture is ranching, it's farming, it's hunting, it's recreation, it's used to be timber. You don't get to just start whacking away at this stuff without, and this is the problem, because nobody knows. Mitigating that and at least sitting down at the table with the people that live there and saying, how is what you're doing, or this is how what you're doing, is going to affect our economy. I'm a deer hunter. When I moved to Modoc County, I remember my wife, when the kids were little, she says, honey, can you pick up a loaf of bread on the way home? I said, sure. I went to the store and I couldn't find a loaf of bread. It was deer season. Nowadays, you can't even tell when deer season is here. Now, how did that happen? Did that happen with mitigation? Did they consider how any of those decisions have affected the economy of Modoc County? You know, I say no, they didn't. So this is why, and, you know, the Tea Parties have been great. The passion that these people have is tremendous. And people call some Tea Parties radical. They may call us radical. You know, I think as long as, like Dave says, as long as we're reasonable. But, you know, I call us passionate Americans. You know, we care. Yeah, we're passionate about this. You know, I have 4 kids. They're all growing up and doing okay, but I've got 7 grandkids and another one coming. And it concerns me that they're not going to be able to do the things that I got to do when I was a kid. So, politics, you know, as far as I'm concerned, and I think I speak for everybody, you know, that's part of the problem with government these days is, you know, I have a standing order at the little Modoc Sheriff's Office, and that is, if anyone on my staff sees me even look like I'm making or starting to make a decision based on politics, to whack me with the biggest board they can find. I refuse to do it. Let the chips fall where they may. I'm going to do what's right. Throw caution to the wind. We need more of that. If I'm not here next term, so be it. And again, I don't want to spend a lot of time up here. We talked for hours this morning. These subjects, every one of these I go to, I learn more. It is an education and it is a work in progress. My thing is, we see these issues, and I'm sure everyone sitting in their chair probably sees this big government in Washington as a big immovable object. And that's true. We get enough people together, though, and we get enough of the sheriffs. By the way, why are the sheriffs so important? Think about this. Clear across this country, think of all the law enforcement, different types of law enforcement. There's National Parks cops, there's BLM, there's FBI, there's state agencies, city agencies. There is no other entity, there's no other law enforcement that is elected by you, the people. The sheriff is that. So what we need to do is be there for support. We need to support, we need to get these comprehensive land use plans. Modoc County, man, I was amazed. I went back after all these 2 conferences and I go, there's no way we got one of those. We have one. We've had it since 1995. And it's done some good. And it's interesting. We have, I'll give you a little, then I'm going to quiet down here for a minute, but we have 8 different committees: Livestock Committee, Wildlife, Water, Timber, Mining, Farming, Recreation, Business, Environmental Committee. All the members of the Land Use Committee, each one of those committees has members. They're registered voters in Modoc County and shall not be actively employed by any federal or state resource management agency. So my thing to you is, thank you so much for being here. I'm humbled by the company up here. These guys are just amazing people. Get out, spread the word. Little spot fires like this, we get enough people together, we can make a difference. So support rural America, and thank you very much for coming and listening to me.
Thank you, Mike. When you hear that word coordination, and again, this is educational process not only for us but for the public as well, is coordination is mandated under federal regulation and law. We're not asking them to do something that we want them to do. We didn't create something that we thought would help us. We're asking them to follow their own regulations. It's their rules. We're looking at the rule going, well, before you decide to close that road down, before you decide to expand the spotted owl territory, before you do that, you have to come and check with every county, and it's their own rule, that they have to coordinate and contact every county, 1, law enforcement, 2, local government, to find out what the impacts are going to be on the public safety and the economy. We're just asking them to follow their own rules, and we're going to hold them to it. Next, I'd like to introduce Del Norte County Sheriff Dean Wilson.
Wave to my kids and wife, okay. Anyway, I want to thank you for inviting me to Weaverville. We've been making this grand tour. I think we ought to have T-shirts with all our, places we've been on the back and dates. Trying to get the message out. Let people know that this is not just something that's occurring in Trinity County, in Modoc County, in Tehama County, in Del Norte County, in Humboldt County. It's happening everywhere. The things that are occurring that are eroding our rights. One of the things that was always so critical when I used to talk to the assemblymen and congressmen and senators in Sacramento, when I used to talk to them, and I said, the most frustrating thing about living where I live, like Trinity County, is we have everything that we need. We have all the resources that we need, and we have the people and we have the will to have a viable and vibrant and extended economy. We can have good jobs and make good money, and we can live good and decent lives. Hardworking people that just want to be able to fish and to have lumber and to farm and to ranch in those communities. And we have the ability, we have the land and everything that nature has given us, and it is absolutely a beautiful place to live. But the government and rules and regulations, not only from the state, but sometimes even local and federal, have begun to shut down our ability to have that kind of lifestyle, the ability to live the lives that we want to live. And like Mike said, the importance of the sheriff is that we are the only elected law enforcement official in the entire system. And we take an oath, and we swear that oath to defend and support the Constitution. Lincoln describes the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence as the silver frame around the golden apple, the picture, because the two of them are inseparable. One can be separated from the other. They enhance each other. And part of that Declaration of Independence is we hold these truths self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by our Creator, with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, what is life? What are the tenets of life? It's the ability to make a living. It's the ability to defend yourself. It's the ability to have the things that you need to sustain yourself. Food, water, shelter. And those rights are given to you by God, not by a government, not permitted by any local government or authority. You have that right by the fact that you were born into this greatest country and that God blessed you with those rights. And as sheriff, it is my duty to ensure that those rights are protected and defended. The fact that people are waking up, the fact that the Tea Party movement did what it did. In 2009, my wife and I, we went to D.C. on a whim. People said, we're going to show up there. We're going to be there on September 12th, 2009. Come to D.C., protest, object about the spending and the health care plan and make yourself be known. And the people that put it on, they expected 50, 70,000 people to show up. 700,000 people showed up from all across the country. People just like myself and my wife that we've never held a protest sign. We've never rallied. We never stood. We never were that political other than to run for office as sheriff. It wasn't in our nature. It wasn't something that we took care of. But we all saw the direction the country was going, like so many Americans have. And we decided that something needed to be done, something different. And so we showed up. And 700,000 people showed up with us. That was a miracle. It wasn't an event. It was a miracle. That so many people in our country have woken up to the fact that this country, this government, this belongs to you. And you have the right and need to stand up and take direction and decide where it's going to go. Not only on the federal level, the state level, but at the local level. Make sure that the people that you vote for, that you elect into office, those sitting up here and those that represent you, they hold your same values, believe the same way that you do, and hold them accountable. That if they aren't doing what you want them to do, you make that known what you want, and you hold those people accountable, because that is the only way that we can assure that representative government does not die. And it is in jeopardy as we speak. And it really takes a moment to wake up and take care of our country and protect it. And I depend on every one of you to do so. There's a passage that I love. And if I can get my phone to work. And it is this one. Okay, now my eyes. Okay. Don't you love being old? Yeah, I know. Okay, here we go. Anyway, this is, I'm human, that's for sure. But this is a quote from Winston Churchill, and this sums up really where I feel that we are at this point in time. And still, if you will not fight for what is right, when it can be easily won without bloodshed, if you will not fight for when victory is assured, and it is not too costly, you may come a time in a moment when you have to fight, when all the odds are against you, and only the precarious chance of survival. And there may even be a worse case. You may have to fight when there is no hope of victory, because it is better to perish than to live as slaves. And today we have that choice. Take the opportunity and stand up for what's right. In our communities, in our counties, the sheriffs here are trying to help to stand up and protect our land rights, our water rights, and the issues that are precious. They're using the salmon in our communities to try to stop agriculture and grazing along the rivers. They're trying to use the travel management plan and the land management plan to lock up our lands. They're trying to use the MLPA, the Marine Life Protection Act, to stop fishing outside of our harbors and in the areas that we can use that our fishermen need to sustain a living. And those are all threats, but we can stop that because the government belongs to us. We just have to take it back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean. Danny Martinez, did I thank you? I sure hope I did, because Danny is a law advisor to Richard, and I think to Ronnie as well. And probably one of the most poignant things he said today, and we talked to them for quite a few hours asking lots of questions. This is a matter of education. If you take the time, and as we are taking the time to become educated, we know what these agencies can and cannot do under the law. So we really need to step up our efforts, if it's me as the sheriff, to help educate my community. If that's what I need to do, that's what I need to do. But it's also on the community itself to help educate itself too. Because again, we're not asking them, we're not creating new laws, we're not coming up with new concepts. We're just asking them to follow the existing law that's been on the books since this country was founded. In some cases, some of it's a little more recent. Next, I'd like to introduce the man that first brought the idea of a public lands committee to my attention, that made me become interested in looking into some of these issues, and that is Mendocino Sheriff Tom Allman. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I didn't get the memo about the tie, so thanks, guys. Yeah, that's a Modoc tie right there, okay? First of all, thank you. It's a Saturday afternoon. Everybody could make a list of 20 things that they could be doing other than being here right now. And I can't think of anything more important than being here in a very beautiful church and discussing these issues with some people who understand that we're certainly not at war, but we're certainly concerned that we may be in a position 10 years from now, 20 years from now, where we're going to say, we wish we had done something. If only we had taken the steps necessary, then we could have prevented whatever's going to happen. And that's why we're here. We all have the same thing. I'd say we all come from the same mold, but he comes from a different one. Look at that man, okay? We love our country. We love our country. But there are portions of the government that are very concerning to us. And because we've had some great leaders, and Jon Lopey, and I'm thrilled he's going to be the last because he's going to be a dynamic speaker for you. But because we've had some leaders that say, listen, everything that we've been told by the federal government on some of these issues is not always true, some of us were going, really? We just thought it was. And everybody's been taking their own responsibility of saying, I'm going to research this or I'm going to research that. And we're coming up with some issues that the federal government, I believe, and there may be representatives from the federal government here. If you are, I'm glad you're here. But there may be some issues that the federal government's saying, we don't like the sheriffs discussing these things. And it should be a little concerning to them because we're actually getting on the same page, and by the use of the computers, by the use of some great research things, we're learning things that say, wait a minute, this has always been happening in our county. You mean it hasn't been happening in your county? And now we're trying to get everything on one piece of paper so we can say we're united. We're sheriffs, we're united, and we think that we should all be treated equal. And that's where I think this process has taken us, and I'm really excited about that. I was raised in Garberville. Thank you for not saying Garbageville. Thank you very much. I'm very proud of Garberville. Very proud of Garberville. My dad worked in a lumber mill. My mom's a retired second grade teacher. And I've always lived in a rural community. I've always realized that our national forests and our BLM areas are parts of my property where I can go recreate. And the fact that we have roads being shut down in my county, the fact that we have water rights that are being taken away from generational families that have always had water rights is the reason I'm involved here, because these things shouldn't happen. The federal government has taken a little bit of an overreaching step, and I have many friends that work for the federal government, so I'm not saying the federal government's bad at all. I'm saying that maybe the fox has been watching a hen house, and we as sheriffs have the ability right now to raise a red flag and say, wait a minute, you know, that's a foul. We are the ones who have the ability to call a foul and to call it as we see it. And so I appreciate what what they said about the election process. You know, this is not an election year for any man up here. The sheriffs, with the exception of San Francisco, we all get elected the same year as a governor. The San Francisco thing's not working out that well, by the way. But this is not an election. We're not up here to stand on a podium and try to get your vote. We're up here because in our heart, we believe that we're doing the right thing. We're not affiliated with a lot of not weird, but extreme groups. We're really not. We're not saying that we're anti-government or we're anarchists. We're just saying that we believe our role as sheriff is to be the watchkeeper for our counties and to do two things. As the sheriff said, as Dean Wilson said, enforce the law and protect your rights. Those are the two things that sheriff is held accountable to. And when you boil it all down to, look at the roads, look at the waters, look at everything, we're protecting your rights when we stand up to the federal government and say, why are you doing this? Tell me the reason you're doing this. And if it's the law, hey, listen, I'll respect the law. But very often we're finding that when we say, show us the law, the conversation changes. And so that's why we're up here, and it's a very humbling feeling to be up here with these gentlemen to represent my county and a good portion. You have 10% of the state sheriffs up here, and we represent a good portion of the rural part of Northern California. So I know there's feelings about, and you talked about the CD for birthers. We're just not going to go, at least myself, I'm not going to go off on those tangents, because my role as sheriff is much too important to risk the protection of the people and the enforcement of the laws. So while I greatly appreciate people who are doing the research and who are crying out loud of what these things are, our role as sheriff is to just keep our eye on the brass ring, and that's protect your rights and enforce the law. So when this started this afternoon, Bruce Haney, and you have a very good sheriff. I want the people of Trinity County to know you have a very good sheriff. He asked us, he said, you know, why don't you just tell them what affects you? Why are you here? Why am I here, involved here? Number one, I'm here because Roy flew me up here today. Thank you very much. Roy, thank you. But I'm here because roads are being closed or not maintained in ways that I think they should be. And if they're going to take our tax dollars, or if they're not going to maintain them, let me know and I can figure out what to do. I'm here because my county depends on taxes. It's one of the few legal economies we have in Mendocino County. And wait a minute. Wait a minute, what are you guys thinking? Yeah, I'm in Trinity, that's right. In 2008, I want you to remember what happened on June 23rd. 2008, at least my county had 132 fires on 2 days. We had our lightning series come through. And our county was ablaze, and there was a portion of the Mendocino National Forest that we were told we could not extinguish the fires because it's wilderness area. It's wilderness area. It's going to continue to burn because the law does not allow any mechanized vehicles to go inside wilderness area. And as sheriff, my responsibility is public safety. I'm not a firefighter, but I'm certainly aware that my role is public safety. And the fact that a wilderness area does not allow a fire engine or a Caterpillar or even a helicopter to go in and extinguish the flames should concern you so much it's hard to sleep. I want you to hear what I'm saying. That there's portions of the National Forest that when they catch on fire, it is absolutely against the law to go in there and use any mechanized vehicle to extinguish a fire. Good luck tonight sleeping on that one, because it's kept me up many nights. So we had to actually let it burn out. And that's how that portion of the forest was burned. I'm not saying that there's portions of the forest that don't need to be burned off, because the timber load, the fire load right now, is getting to the point where some experts have said it's 10 times higher than it's ever been in the past because we have not been maintaining our forest. And for those of you who live in rural areas, please do everything you possibly can to protect your house, because when the big fire happens and you call 911, I'm going to tell you that the government's not going to be there immediately to protect you. I mean, I'd like to calm you and say everything's going to be well, but I want you to be realistic. And that's why we're up here, because these things are happening in our counties. You don't see any municipal sheriffs up here. You don't see any urban sheriffs. you see rural sheriffs that know that timber companies pay taxes on land, and right now they're not able to sell any logs, but they're still paying taxes on land. And by God, as sheriffs, we'll continue to go after and eradicate marijuana on their land because no one else is doing it. And we have to give them that piece of freedom, that freedom, peace of mind to say, yes, law enforcement's going to go up there, even though there's a lot of people in the state, 57%, who believe that legitimate medical marijuana is something that will be respected, and it is respected. I think that all 6 counties up here can say that there's legitimate medical marijuana practices happening in their state or their counties that law enforcement doesn't go into, but I want you to know there is 0 marijuana allowed on public lands. And one of my gripes about the federal government is that we have this huge piece of property, the Mendocino National Forest, where I'm not getting assistance as much as I need to go after the marijuana that's affecting my kids' ability to go recreate. And I have 2 grown boys that want to go recreate, and I need some help. If you're not aware of what Dean Wilson talked about, the Marine Life Protection Act, and in Trinity County you may not be aware of that, it's something that's absolutely going to have one of the biggest financial impacts on the North Coast in our lifetime. Please research the Marine Life Protection Act. My youngest son is a professional or commercial crab fisherman, and he greatly enjoys his career. The Marine Life Protection Act absolutely will shut that down. The Marine Life Protection Act, if you're an abalone diver, you better take up a different hobby, because it's certainly not going to be allowed as we know it now along the coast. So it's huge, huge things coming down from the federal government, which are 12 months, 24 months away from being permanent on the record books, law books. Two last things. And the biggest is not the biggest, but it's one of the biggest. I want you to look at these 6 sheriffs right now and realize the reason that concealed weapons are alive and well in Northern California are because of our ability to issue them to you. So with that, I strongly urge, please be responsible. We want you to have a concealed weapon. We do. If you can legally possess a firearm, we want you to have it. We want you to be responsible. The last thing we want at a state sheriff's conference is we do not want another sheriff coming to us to say, hey, I heard about one of your concealed weapons, you know, of whatever happened in Florida or something, using that for an example. Be responsible. And if you want a concealed weapon, I don't know what county everybody lives in, I'm going to say that if you can legally possess a firearm, the only thing that's holding you back is yourself. You need to make sure that your rights of the Second Amendment are protected. So please do that. And I just want to end by thanking you, because I was raised in a very rural county or town, if you've ever been to Garberville. I was raised truly believing, as Dave said, that the federal government, that the state government, and the local government were all on the same page, and they were all here to make my life easier. And they were all here to make sure that I was going to be formed into an adult that was going to be a responsible, contributing member of society, which I'd like to think I am. But now that I've learned how little we communicate with each other, and as little as we cooperate, you as citizens need to ask, not just us, but ask assembly people, ask senators, ask your congressmen, when the last time they sat down with the local and state representatives, and ask us how we felt. Because when it all boils down, if that 8.0 earthquake happens, if who knows what happens, the people up here are the ones who are basically going to take control of their county and do everything we can to lead you out of it. So you as a responsible citizen have to stand up. You as a responsible citizen have to voice your opinion. And I'm going to say this loud and clear. This is an election year. If you fail to vote in this election, I hope that you do not attend another meeting like this. Okay? Because we want to talk to people who vote and make a difference, because that's the only way that we're going to correct some of the mistakes we've made. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, everyone has to get engaged. Everyone has to get involved. It's great to see youth. It would be nice to see more, because as we age, we need to pass this baton on. And these are issues that, that you're going to learn. You're going to be really surprised. You may be surprised. Maybe you already know. But when you see that the authority that is really under the, granted to the sheriff in this county or in their respective counties, like I said, Commissioner Rardon's going to really open your eyes, really open my eyes, both you and Danny. Thank you. You know, there's a reason why I saved Sheriff Lopey for last. That's where we had the first one of these. He's the ringer. Yeah. But you know, we all got, you know, those of us that were brand new sheriffs, even the veteran sheriffs, you know, with the governor's realignment and taking state prisoners and doing things that everybody got really hammered with that one. But John has gone through, and his county has gone through some stuff that when he came into office that I'll tell you what, talk about a man that stood up and took charge and really has been leading his county towards through some of these difficult issues with agencies. I commend him for that, and I'm proud that he's here, proud that I know him. One thing I want to add is that, you know, a couple people have come up to me and they said, you know, hey, I saw you on YouTube. What loony group are you part of? And I'll tell you what, I gave you a little history and how Sheriff Lopey here asked us to come and support him and the citizens of Siskiyou so we could present a united front. I'll tell you what, I considered that just being a good neighbor. That's what I was. I wasn't going up there, wasn't going up there to throw my weight around or show any special authority. I went up there as a good neighbor. If that makes me a little kooky and a little loony, then I'll accept that. But that's what we all need to be. We all need to be good neighbors. So with that, I will introduce Sheriff Jon Lopey, Siskiyou County.
Thank you, Bruce. And I do think you have a great sheriff here. Sheriff Bruce Haney is a fabulous sheriff, and I think all these sheriffs up here, they're kind of heroes to me. And standing up here as another sheriff, I'm honored to work with them. And you know, the thing about these sheriffs is they've got the courage to stand up, and they're willing to put their careers on the line, which is becoming increasingly less common in this day and age. But these are great sheriffs here, and they are willing to stand up for their citizenry. Now, Tom is kind of a tough act to follow too, but I'm going to just give you kind of a thumbnail sketch of what's going on in Siskiyou County. I can't give you all the facts because there's so many things going on that I don't have enough time. However, I wanted to mention a couple things about the Constitution. Some of our sheriffs have mentioned the importance of honoring the Constitution because I think that's a pretty just amazing document. Because if we don't honor the Constitution, just like Reagan, just like Jefferson, just like a lot of the leaders in the past said, we're done for as a nation. The preamble to the Constitution says, we the people. It doesn't say we the government or we the bureaucracy or we the politicians. It says, we, the people. And the willingness of these brave sheriffs to stand up for the people and to serve you is why we're here, because we're not here for you to serve us. We're here to serve you, and that is what servitude and that principle of the Constitution endures to this day, but it's being threatened. Jefferson also once said, all that is necessary for tyranny to take a foothold in our nation is for people of good conscience to remain silent. You probably heard the quote by Edmund Burke. He said the same thing. He said, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. It is time to do something. Now, as a sheriff, you know we're sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's pretty important. But the basic reason, I'll tell you, the sheriffs are up here to not only defend freedom, but also defend our citizenry. I'll tell you what we're not up here for. And this is what's, we're under attack. Why? Because we're standing up against some, and I want to say some, governmental intrusions into our lives, and some of these intrusions are threatening our freedoms. We're not extremists. We're not militia leaders. We're not wackos. We're not, I heard this week that I'm a militia leader, all this other stuff. You know what? Hey, we're just ordinary people like you, but we happen to be sheriffs. And I do love this country. I just came from Armed Forces Day in Siskiyou County. We had Armed Forces Day to honor all those soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and Coast Guardsmen that served in our nation throughout its history. I believe it's like 41 million, and over 1 million Americans have sacrificed their lives to keep this Constitution alive, to make every generation do a little bit better than the one that preceded it. And the least we could do is just hang tough and support this Constitution, and also make the next generation, like Dean said, our kids and grandkids, and I've got grandkids, and I do want them to have a better life. I don't want them to have an American that's less than what we grew up in. Now, one of the other reasons the sheriffs are involved in this fight is because every incursion, potentially, by a federal or state agency, and again, and I got to tell you, I get along with most federal and state agencies. I never have problems with the FBI, the DEA, the Department of Justice, the Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement, the CHP. But some agencies we do have problems with. Because Siskiyou County, we've got so many threats. I'll just mention it. I got a lot of information here, but I'll just tell you that the reason I first got involved in this fight was because, Siskiyou County used to be a prosperous county, one of the most prosperous counties in California. Over 33% of the economy was based on the timber industry. Many of my ancestors, even during the Depression, like two grandfathers, worked during the Depression because there were lumber mills to work in. My father worked in a lumber mill when he got out of the Navy after serving his country in World War II. I had a cousin, and I had other relatives in the timber industry. In the early 80s, Siskiyou County had 22 lumber mills. Now they have 2. We have 8 or 9 communities that are economically depressed. You say, well, what's the sheriff care about that for? Well, I'll tell you why the sheriffs care. Is because when the very economic vitality is being squeezed from our communities and our counties, that is also hurting public safety and all county services. Because instead of having the best schools, the best law enforcement, the best county roads, the best public behavioral health services, we have some of the worst. We've lost 30% of our deputies and correctional officers in the last few years. Why? Because our economy's going downhill. Why? Because the I'll just tell you, things like the spotted owl. Now, I'm going to tell you something that all these sheriffs would tell you. And I'm not picking on, we do have to take care of the environment. But the way I see it, the Constitution was actually conceived by Christian men. And these Christian men formulated that Constitution really because who do we answer to? We answer to a higher order, a higher calling. We answer to God because God gave us inalienable rights. And it's not people that give us those rights. And when I look at the hard-working citizens of Siskiyou County, well, the timber industry is almost gone because of the spotted owl. Now, I'm all for helping the spotted owl. But can you imagine destroying the whole industry, the whole timber industry, for a bird that probably doesn't prosper from these, these draconian control measures anyway. So we destroy the timber industry. What do we have left? We have ranching and farming. Now, other than the timber industry, do you know who works harder than ranchers and farmers? I've never seen anybody work as hard as a rancher and farmer. It's a 24-hour job, and you know what? What is more important than growing food, for our nation and our communities? And then we have, other enterprises. Right now, farming and ranching is the #1 industry in Siskiyou County. There is a concerted effort to take water away from ranches and farms for endangered species. And again, I'm not bashing endangered species or people that want to protect the environment. I think we all are environmentalists, because if we weren't, we wouldn't be living in the places we're living. But what bothers me is when all these sheriffs talked about coordination, like the National Environmental Policy Act specifically requires, before the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, or NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Agency, the National Marine Fisheries Service, before the North Coast Regional Water Control Board, before EPA, before the Corps of Engineers, before all these agencies come in and they try to inflict these bright ideas on us, they're supposed to coordinate with local officials, and there's supposed to be a balance between what's supposed to be prosperous and good for the people and our traditions, our way of life, our economy, and for our public health and safety. They're supposed to come in and they're supposed to formulate their plans to be consistent with our plans at the county level and not just do what they feel like doing. And there's supposed to be a balance between protecting the environment and protecting your interests. Now, what's happened over the last 40 years in Siskiyou County is there's been a huge imbalance, because most of the citizens, and you may have heard this before, most citizens tell me, you know what, I think some of these government agencies care more for fish, frogs, birds, and trees than they do about the human race. And all these sheriffs, and I am concerned, when an agency comes in, they don't properly coordinate. And they try to push their, policies and their regulations and their ideologies on our people. It's devastated our communities. Now, we have issues with 4 dams. You say, well, why are you getting involved with the 4 dams that they want to take down? Well, we just found out recently that there's a doctor named Dr. Paul Hauser, and he was a scientist for the Bureau of Reclamation. He's a brave man. And that's one of the things I want you to remember, that there are a lot of good people that work in the federal and state government. We got to be careful that we don't want to paint everybody with the broad brush, because there are some of these agencies and some of these people within the agencies that sympathize with us and are trying to do the right thing. A lot of these ideas are formulated by the state in Sacramento and then kind of implemented at the local level. And of course, a lot of the federal agencies formulate their policies in Washington, D.C., and then they try to basically impose their will on us. And a lot of these people don't have the faintest idea, what fish needs water for what or anything else, because they don't even live here. But these dams, the reason I got involved is because, first of all, when they formulated the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement to remove those dams in the Klamath River, the federal officials, there were like 12 agencies and several state agencies, plus the respective governors of Oregon and California, formulating these plans, and they didn't properly coordinate with us. And we asked them, why you didn't coordinate? Well, you didn't sign the plan. You didn't sign the plan. I said, well, you're still supposed to coordinate. No, we're not going to coordinate with you. We're going to do what we want to do. That's, to me, that is a violation of law. And then I asked, the Department of the Interior, Secretary Salazar was actually going to make a decision whether to remove the dams like this spring. But Dr. Hauser, getting back to Dr. Hauser, he was a scientist to step forward and say, hey, look, some of this science is bogus. Some of this science is inaccurate. Some of the science lacks integrity. So he questioned, he went against the status quo, and what happened? What happened to him? He got fired. But the message in his evaluation of the science for dam removal was this, that we have to, this is a good lesson for all of us. The lesson was that sometimes the science may merely be formulated to achieve the ultimate goals of some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. And Secretary Salazar, he actually was told by officials within the Bureau of Reclamation that, well, wait a minute, we're formulating a plan to remove the dams because that's what the Secretary of Interior wants. Instead of doing it the right way and saying, hey, what's your objective? Well, we want to improve the habitat of the coho and Chinook salmon. Well, can we do that without removing the dams? Well, yes, we can. There are some viable alternatives. But see, that's not getting done. And another thing, from a public safety standpoint, you know, I started questioning, well, wait a minute. If we blow these dams, what's going to happen with that 21 million cubic tons of sediment, which has hazardous materials in it, that's going to go down the Klamath River, like 1.5 to 2 feet deep? It's going to head up in Del Norte County. What's going to happen with that? How's that going to impact public health and safety and the welfare of our people? They never gave us a reasonable response. Well, what about the reservoir we use? It's going to eliminate all recreation in the area, which is going to further play havoc on our general fund, which provides deputies. What about all the other 400 species that you're ignoring just to help the salmon? Oh, well, I mean, they just don't have the answers. What about the reservoir we use for wildland fire suppression? They don't have reasonable explanations. That's why we're getting involved in this, along with our Board of Supervisor members and our citizens. I got to tell you, I agree that it's not going to be the sheriffs. It's going to be you. We, the people, got to stand up and question, and the thing is, us sheriffs, we're not anti-government, but what we believe in is questioning things that don't sound right, or questioning things that impact public health and safety of our citizens. You know, I like our citizens. I love the citizens of Siskiyou County. They're good people. They're good, hardworking people. And I'd stand them up, and I think Trinity and all these other counties represented are the very best that our country has to offer, and they deserve a fair break. Another thing, 1 week in Siskiyou County. Liz and Maxine back there, and some of you know about this, Mike. 1 week in Siskiyou County. This is how turbulent it gets sometimes. I go to 3 meetings in 1 week. The first week, water board meeting. What's the subject? Farmers and ranchers in Scott and Shasta Valleys are trying to pull out of the Water Master Program. You know why? The Department of Water Resources, the state agency, is raising Water Master fees on those ranchers and farmers 800%. I heard that. I said, you mean to tell me a bureaucrat will look you in the face and tell you they're raising your fees 800% and that individual has a straight face? I'll tell you, kind of a screwy deal. But why would they do that? Because all these great ideas are designed to get, if some of these agencies push their will on you and they get control of the water and they force you off the land, then my county's going to be one big giant game preserve or nature preserve. Ultimately, that's what will happen. What's the other meeting? Well, let me see. The National Marine Fisheries Service, which is part of NOAA, and NOAA is part of the Department of Commerce, the Commerce Department. They gave us a presentation on the new coho salmon restoration plan, a voluntary plan. That was in the same week. And then what was the other one? The other one was we had another excursion. This is the North Coast Regional Water Control Board. They held a meeting because they want to impose a groundwater monitoring program in Scott Valley. And someone asked, well, how much is this going to cost? Well, we're going to have some sophisticated instruments, and it's going to cost $50 or maybe several dollars an acre. I said, you mean you're going to charge our ranchers and farmers, more money for this groundwater monitoring program? Yes. Well, why is that? Well, we lost our funding, and now, our funding has to be generated by fees. So those are some of the things that are happening in Siskiyou County. Another thing that's happening in Siskiyou County, there's when you talk about the Forest Service, now I'm not trying to knock the Forest Service, but there's a group of forestry experts in Scott Valley that we're starting to meet, and they're starting an educational program to try to educate the public and also county officials and people everywhere on how dangerous this lack of forest management is for us from a public safety standpoint. And I concur, Tom was right on target. The forests are 10 times, they have 10 times the built up fuels that they should have when you consider policies, that were 20 or 30 years removed. So what's happened is we got all this built up fuel, our forests are ripe for catastrophic wildland fires, and then some guy or gal that wants to go out there and do some logging can't even get a job because they're shutting off the forest. And isn't it kind of stupid that we don't even cut down dead and dying diseased trees? Does that make sense? So that's what's devastating public safety. That's what's devastating our communities. Another thing I get a little sensitive about, I had a meeting with some NOAA special agents. If you're not aware of it, they have an Office of Law Enforcement. And I got a little upset because one of their special agents visited a farmer. And the farmer got a complaint from an environmental activist. And these are the two complaints. These are heinous violations of the law. One, he was removing gravel from a dry creek bed, something his family's done for 5 generations. And guess what? He was in compliance with the Department of Fish and Game, the state Fish and Game. He had an incidental take permit. So in actuality, I contacted the Fish and Game. They said he's in compliance. The other complaint by the same activist was he had too many cows in a pasture. I said, oh, is that right? Well, how's this environmental activist know how many cows should be in a pasture? The backbone of our economy are these ranchers and farmers, and we got some environmental activist who is commenting on too many cows. And oh, by the way, he is absolutely certain that one of those cows walked over the creek and the cow urinated in the creek. Thereby significantly endangering the coho salmon that may be there or may not be. So those are the kind of ridiculous things. Then we have the Transportation Management Plan. We're grappling with the same things with the Forest Service. And I told the Forest Service that, hey, look, why doesn't the Forest Service coordinate with other federal agencies? Because if you had a forest management plan, you started thinning out the trees, the forest would be healthier, the owls could actually see the prey on the forest floor and prosper, and you would raise the water table because some of these big trees suck up a couple 100 gallons of water a day. So you could work together, give people jobs, thin out the forest, reduce the potential for catastrophic wildland fire, and give people jobs and help our tax base, and maybe we could be economically, viable again. Now, another thing, I'll just mention real quick, another incident. Farmer called up, said, oh, by the way, Aaron helped us back there with this last issue with the complaint. But I called the North Coast Regional Water Control Board, and I talked to the gal in charge of the North Region. I said, hey, why don't you just tell this environmental activist to go pound sand? That farmers in complaint. Well, you know, we have to fall through with the complaints, and he keeps complaining, and he writes these eloquent letters. I say, oh, that's great. We got the tail wagging the dog around here again. So I get another call. Farmer says, hey, I've got several agencies that want to visit me. And this is just a farmer just trying to make a living. And I said, well, what agencies want to visit you? EPA, federal EPA, North Coast Regional Water Control Board, the Army Corps of Engineers, NOAA is back, and then the California Department of Fish and Game was just going along just to see what was going to happen. So I called the representative from the state, the North Coast Regional Water Control Board, and I tell her, I said, why are you bothering this farmer? Well, because I know the creek is dry, but at any time of the year, if there's water in the creek, and there could be endangered species in the creek, then he may have to get some more permits. I said, he's already got a permit from the California Department of Fish and Game. And I said, how much is this permit going to cost? And the articulate, bureaucratic answer I got was, well, some are spendy and some are not. I said, okay, can you tell me how much the permit's going to be? Because I heard they're going to be $650 at least. She goes, well, some of them are spendy. That's all I could get out of her. So the bottom line was, the bottom question I asked her, I said, how many permits does it take for a hardworking citizen of Siskiyou County to just farm and to make a living? How many permits does it take? Well, so far they haven't come back, but now they're making another pass. But see, those are the kind of ridiculous things that are happening. And there's also a tax against mining and recreation. There's a proposal to seize thousands of acres of land in Northern California and in Oregon as monument land, which would restrict it to grazing and four-wheeling and fishing and hiking and hunting and, you know, a lot of the other things people use the land for. And that could be just a sweep of a pen. The president, under the Antiquities Act, has seized virtually millions of acres of land, you know, out west. So we're facing that. Let me see. What else could I tell you? Oh, we're trying to start a lumber mill down in Happy Camp, because Happy Camp at one time was a very economically depressed community, but they had like 6 lumber mills at one time. And we had meetings with the Forest Service. The Forest Service official was actually trying to help us out, but he said, it's going to cost you 4 or 5 years just to get this lumber mill approved. And I said, well, the people need it. Because I will tell you right now, my biggest gripe with some of these dumb ideas is Siskiyou County, prosperous county, just like Trinity and these other counties. We are rich in resources, but we can't tap into them. We are rich, but we are poor. I mean, that's a fact of the matter. And what happens is the Forest Service goes, well, it's going to take 4 or 5 years because the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service just issued a new spotted owl restoration plan, and the North Coast Water Regional Control Board is going to go after you because of the water quality. That spotted owl restoration plan may close off most of those forest areas in the Happy Camp area, which may squelch that idea about having a lumber mill. But could you imagine if we had a few lumber mills, if people were actually able to make a living? Can you imagine that? And then going back to the dams, the dams provide clean energy to 77,000 people. And I'm not here to tell you, oh, we don't need to take the dams down. What I'm telling you is I expect our government to be honest with us, to tell us what is really going on, They'll listen to the people because 70% of the people in Siskiyou County said we don't want the dams removed. But I'll tell you, they aren't listening. A lot of them aren't listening. And that's why we're up here with you. And I'll close. I just want to make a couple other points and I probably shouldn't say this because it's politically incorrect, but the media is not on our side. But you have to hold the media accountable. And I don't know, you may be different here. But you have to hold the media accountable and don't let them get away with bad science, bad reports, and incomplete investigative journalism, which is happening right now. I agree with my fellow sheriffs. You gotta be measured. We gotta be aggressive. You gotta get involved. You gotta get educated, and you have to do something. You have to encourage your neighbors, your friends, your relatives, your significant others to get involved in this fight. And I appreciate you being here because I know there's a lot going on out here, and the weather's great, and you could be somewhere else. But if we don't take our country back by getting actively involved in all these causes and standing up for this great document we call the Constitution. And I might add, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It's not the legislative branch or the executive branch or the Supreme Court. It's the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. And that's why these great sheriffs are standing for it today. But you have to be careful that you don't get involved in some of these extremist groups or elements or anything that's going to be construed as illegal because it'll hurt your credibility. But fight and don't give up. Because if we don't, again, just like all these great sheriffs said, the country that we have and that we are formulating and we are building for our children and grandchildren is not going to be recognizable unless we stand up for this Constitution and we fight for it, and stand up for your sheriffs, stand up for your elected officials, and hold every elected official accountable. Interact with them on a regular basis. I interact with our assemblyman, our senator, our congressman, or their staff continuously. Get to know them, write letters to the editor, get involved, help your sheriff, help your Board of Supervisor members or commissioners if you're from Oregon, and we'll get her done. God bless you and thank you for being great Americans.
Let's give all these sheriffs a hand, taking the time to come up here. Thank them.